It's time for Security Now. Steve Gibson is here. Lots of news. We'll talk about the 60 Minutes piece on the NSA. Steve will answer some questions about that. We'll also answer some of your questions. It's a Q&A episode next on Security Now.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit. Bandwidth for Security Now is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com. This is Security Now with Steve Gibson, episode 435, recorded December 18th, 2013. Your questions, Steve's answers, number 180. It's time for Security Now. Drink. Gulp. Gulp. But what we're drinking is coffee, so it's okay. Yes. Take a sip every time Steve takes a sip. Security Now is a show all about your security and privacy online.
You can stay in your seat.
Yeah. Got it. Now, that looks like a nice little ceramic mug. Steve Gibson's here. He's our...
That is, but I'm refilling it with this. My Contigo. Really like my Contigo.
Mm-hmm. I ordered that Indiegogo or Kickstarter.
I did
thing.
too.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'll be interested to see. It's got some sort of special properties for keeping coffee
warm. What I love
warm.
is that the coffee that comes right out of the pot would scald your mouth.
It's too hot.
You know, it would burn you. So you pour that coffee into this.
Yes.
And it immediately drops its temperature down to drinkable temperature by absorbing the heat. But then it gives that heat back over the next few hours, holding the coffee at that temperature.
Perfect.
So,
Perfect.
I think so. We'll see if it's true or nonsense. That would be good. Yeah.
We shall see. So this is our last show for. Well, wait a minute. I don't know. Next week is Christmas. Going to be a best of.
We have our time capsule episode or actually 3 episodes from our blast from the past when you and I first were in physical proximity with each other, when we first actually met face to face.
Meat space, we call it. Yes.
Meat space back in '98, 15 years ago, and then and I left in. I mean, I just basically it's an hour long, so it's 3 pieces of 3 shows but some fun commercials from back then, and you know, you being you back with the Screensavers show and Kate Patello, and I was looking for. Well, actually, I'm sure I have some that's got Sarah when she was, in diapers.
She was in the
still.
In diapers. She was she was in the what they call the babe. What I foolishly at the time called the babe corral. It was tongue in cheek, I assure you.
Yeah.
I don't think I made that up. Yeah, she was. But she was a regular with tips and so forth. Yeah, that was later. Yeah. That was the.
And Kevin
Kevin
like
Rose,
he did
12-year-old. Yeah. He didn't actually. Yeah.
So I'm sure I have those. I have everything we ever did.
Wow. So we could do this for years.
Over the next few years, this will be our Christmas special.
Awesome. That's great.
So
that's next week.
You know, we had such a long podcast of news last week that even though it was nominally a Q&A, we answered 2 questions. So I've removed those from the top and added a couple to make up. So we're going to do another Q&A. We've not been doing Q&As. That was our first Q&A in a month when we did that last week, because there's been so much news. Today we've got pretty much all things NSA. We had a week of crazy NSA stuff. The Constitution, 60 Minutes, Obama, Silicon Valley, and who actually is Edward Snowden. Then we have it just occurred today, news of a new side channel attack on crypto keys. Listening to a laptop, you can decode a 4096-bit RSA key.
Oh, my goodness.
I know. And then a lot of people have asked me, because Microsoft made some news by announcing they joined the FIDO Alliance, which is the Internet Authentication Alliance that Google and Yubico and other bunch of companies are doing. So everyone wants to know, well, what's that relative to my work with Squirrel? And a few sci-fi tidbits and 10 great questions. So,
holy cow! We better get going.
Great show. Yeah. So
So did you watch 60 Minutes?
I did, and we'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
I thought it'd be fun to play this YouTube video, Leo, into the podcast. It's not very long. It's only a couple of minutes. And people, I think, will get a kick out of it. It's clever.
Is this from the NSA, or is this a...
This is the NSA is coming to town rather than Santa Claus.
Unfortunately, there's a 15-second commercial in front, so we'll just pause for a moment and breathe deeply. Enjoy the silence.
Take a sip from your coffee, everyone.
Here we go.
Ah, the holiday season. A time for celebration, magic, and spending time with the people you love. But don't forget who's watching to make sure you're not being naughty.
You better watch out, you better not Skype, you better log out, yeah, you better not type. The NSA is coming to town.
Santa and sunglasses.
You're making a list, they're checking it twice, they're watching almost
Snowden,
every
top of the naughty
electronic
list.
device. The NSA is coming to town.
And he swaps the phones, takes a picture.
They see when you are sleeping, they hear while you're awake.
Only in New York.
They know who you call and who you write, so encrypt for goodness
She
sake.
took his hat and stepped on it.
With Congress in the dark and a cloak and dagger court, we're looking for
He
answers.
just
and
ran
they're
off with her
coming up
phone.
short.
That's cold.
The NSA
Uh-oh.
is coming to town.
Uh-oh.
They're making a list, checking it twice. They're watching almost every electronic device. The NSA
Obviously, these are
is
real people who are getting a little
coming to
miffed.
Uh-huh.
This is from the ACLU.
NSA is coming to town. The NSA is coming to town.
I love it. The ACLU keeping up their
You
record
wouldn't
of...
let government agents spy on your special holiday moments in person. Why are we letting them do it in the digital world? Help us end the NSA's unlawful spying program.
Wow.
Click here and take action now.
ACLU. That's something.
So
Now, if I get a
anyway,
takedown from the ACLU, I'm gonna tell them to call you.
So I think they'll be quite happy that we're
They
spreading
should,
this around,
but you never
this
know.
holiday cheer. Just so everyone knows, all of the show notes are now always at grc.com on grc.com/SN. So, for example, the link to this, which Leo just played, if anyone wants to, who just heard it, isn't looking at the video, wants to, play this, it's on YouTube, you can get the link. They're right here in the show notes, the same one that Leo just clicked on. So everyone is certainly welcome to do that. So yeah, the NSA on 60 Minutes. That generated a lot of Twitter traffic with people saying, oh, come on. And in fact, even the EFF said, they tweeted, we planned to write a takedown of, and then said at 60 Minutes, NSA puff piece yesterday. But then the D.C. 6th District Court did it for us. And so they gave a little link to it. So, I mean, for me, what was most interesting was right off the bat, the quote, investigative journalist who did the piece was no one we've ever seen before.
Yeah, he happened to be have a lot of ties to law enforcement over the years.
Yes, he used to be DNI.
Defense.
But I thought it was interesting that's shoot.
He worked for the govs, the feds.
Yes,
doing
yeah.
intelligence, defense, and national intelligence,
That's it.
or Department of National Intelligence.
But what you normally have for big stories is one of the core 60 Minutes team. And it struck me as very odd that for a story of this clear import that they had chosen to do, none of their main people wanted to weigh in on this. And in fact, I mean, it was a puff piece. What annoyed me was that to the, on camera, to the 60 Minutes investigators' face, they were just saying what we know to be lies. I mean, they were asked, is the NSA collecting data on millions of Americans? No, we're not doing that. Well, Okay, wait a minute. You know, the
We're
next
just
day,
collecting phone records, metadata. They even said that later in the piece.
yeah, they did. So there was, although it was a different person, so there was some. So the piece was also self-contradictory. So again, there were no follow-up questions. That no one was like pushed hard. They made a point of saying, "Oh, I've never been interviewed before. I've never been on camera." And it's like, okay, you know. So anyway, I was, yeah, you know, our listeners were just sort of rolling their eyes. So I didn't think very much of it. And of course, the next day, Monday, came the news that a federal judge ruled that, in fact, the mass collection of telephone metadata is unconstitutional. So there's a huge collection of lawsuits. Everybody is suing everyone. There are shareholders like suing IBM because IBM has indicated IBM didn't tell them that there would be a consequence to IBM's international sales. Apparently, like IBM's China sales has just taken a big hit because China's now worried that IBM is a branch of the NSA and is spying on them. And so the shareholders of IBM are suing IBM. Meanwhile, we've got all kinds of class action suits against AT&T and Verizon for sharing the data. And, you know, I mean, it's just a disaster. So one other thing that happened is that yesterday, on Tuesday, the White House invited 15 of the top Silicon Valley tech execs to come and like sit around a table and have a photo event, basically. You know, Tim Cook of Apple, Eric Schmidt of Google, execs from Twitter, Microsoft, Facebook, Salesforce, Netflix, Etsy, Dropbox, Yahoo, Zynga, Sherpa Global, Comcast, LinkedIn, and AT&T. So, you know, sort of like although I don't see any Verizon among those, but maybe they were there, 15 of them in total. And so, you know, this was to I don't know what, air everyone's grievances. Barack apparently
Ostensibly, it was about the Healthcare.gov debacle.
Oh, was it also? Because I knew that was part of it.
That seemed to be, well, those stories before the event said meeting with Silicon Valley to talk about Healthcare.gov. Of course, these executives had a different agenda, and apparently the president deflected them as best he could.
Yeah, well, for example, the Washington Post had an article, and they quoted an industry official who was familiar with the company's views as saying, for example, "What the hell are you doing? Are you really hacking into the infrastructure of American companies overseas, the same American companies that cooperate with your lawful orders and spend a lot of money to comply with them to facilitate your intelligence collection?" So that characterized the sentiment of these companies. And I did see an interesting counter take on this that was a little bit of a reminder, and that is to say, well, let's not forget that, you know, these companies to varying degrees live by tracking and profiling their own users. You know, it's literally their published business model. You know, Eric Schmidt has been quoted saying, "We know where you are, we know where you've been, we can more or less know what you're thinking about. Your digital identity will live forever because there's no delete button." So it's, you know, he's got to be careful that, you know, he's complaining about the government spying when, you know, many consumers are concerned that, you know, Google is watching them too carefully. I think there, of course, that there's a difference. One is disclosure.
You can also opt out.
It's exactly, and power. You know, Google doesn't have the ability to knock on your door and disappear you under the Patriot Act and deny any opportunity for you to have legal representation. You just are gone, and our government does have that power. And I remember a lesson I learned way back. And you'll remember, Leo, in the spyware days, you know, when the term was born, spyware, because I discovered this stuff on my own machine, this Oriate spyware, which was later renamed Radiate. And it was when I was beta testing the Zone Alarm firewall, which was the first firewall that did outbound blocking. And so I installed it on my machine, and a notice popped up telling me that something I'd had no knowledge about was trying to connect to the internet. And I was like, what? It turns out that PKZip had installed this. It was part of their business model. They brought this stuff in, and even though I had registered it, it was the, you downloaded the unregistered version, and then you give them the license, and then it stops displaying ads. Well, this was a technology that displayed ads in a window in the application. And so this was the framework for that. And even though I think I'd even uninstalled PKZip, I was using something else by then, the instructions were explicit from Oriate: do not uninstall us, because we can be shared by many, different freeware in order to monetize freeware. So this wasn't malicious, but this was something I never was told about. There was it was not consensual. And so I wrote opt out immediately in order to remove this stuff from my machine, which was, it turns out this was phenomenally widely spread through the internet and nobody knew about it. And so it generated a huge response. And my point is that I was privy to the letters that people were writing to Oriate. I mean, beyond livid. And some of the language and the terminology, I mean, with, reference to totalitarian regimes in the past, it was sobering to see how upset people were. And what I realized was, it's because this was a surprise. This was in their machine, and they had no knowledge of it. It wasn't that it was malicious back then. Stuff today is much more so. It's just that this happened without their knowledge. And I think it was the beginning of this. Now everyone's kind of like, oh, okay, well, I got to, get this stuff out of my machine. But this was the coining of the term spyware. This was the first evidence of this kind of thing happening. So people were really upset. And so my point is that I'm sure that a lot of the heat generated over this, the whole Edward Snowden revelation series, is that we just really didn't know. On some level, yeah, okay, there was an assumption. But, we've seen slides with graphic details. And so that's a different story.
That was another funny part of the 60 Minutes thing, is the only debate over Edward Snowden was, should we give him amnesty so we can get the other files back from him, or should we just,
right? He's
a terrorist, so throw the book at him. You don't want to.
Right. And the guy who understood the depth of the breach and the number of 1.3 million, I think, files was the number that was cited, and I'd seen that elsewhere. Yeah. He was of the opinion, well, it would be really nice to have those back, because he knows now the extent of what, if they have a number like that, they have a sense for what has gone missing.
I would guess they would know exactly. I mean, there must be logs. I would guess they.
I don't know, maybe, but certainly they have a count.
Yeah.
And he knows actually how much on his good behavior Edward has been. I mean, what hasn't been disclosed is a lot relative to what they believe he got. And so, I mean, and again, it's the case that Snowden had a specific goal, and that was of generating accountability, and he is achieving that. Yeah. And not more. And so I really think he's acted responsibly so far.
I didn't ask you, and I don't want to sidetrack you because you've moved on, but about this BIOS virus that they were describing in this piece.
Yeah. Okay, so the thing that I was put in mind of was the Chernobyl virus. That was the thing that I wrote the free recovery tool for. I called it Fix CIH because it was also known as the CIH virus.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And there are BIOS flash ROM erasing viruses around. that's, this was a hard drive erasing virus, but there have been some viruses that specifically wipe the BIOS and turn your board into a brick.
Right.
And so that's what I'm thinking. I mean, I heard a lot of people poo-pooing it. It's like, well, if somebody wanted to,
it's not generally the MO of people who spread malware these days. I mean, that's just malicious.
Well, right, because it kills the platform that the thing's on.
Not what they want.
Right. Exactly. And this has always been the argument against why viruses don't kill the machines they're living on, is that there's always a chance they can spread more if they stay alive.
Right.
But if, for example, a foreign power wanted to really, seriously hurt the U.S. This is like Daniel Suarez sort of,
this is cyber warfare stuff.
Yeah,
but
cyber
again,
warfare.
I think more successful bringing down the power plant in other ways.
Well, think about it, Leo. If it were actually possible to spread something that zeroed the firmware on motherboards, it would,
that'd be
in
pretty
fact,
bad. Yeah.
it would be truly devastating.
It seemed as if they were looking for something that would be as scary as possible to make people feel better about the work they're doing.
Although, okay, see, the other thing that has come out is that it's very clear, I think, to anyone looking at all of the news, that the NSA lies to Congress.
Right.
They exaggerate the benefit and the effect of this vacuuming of everything. And for example, someone matter of factly said, "Oh yeah, we've thwarted at least 50 terrorist plots using the mass metadata collection." And then upon further analysis, it's like, okay, well, talk to us. Which ones? Oh, well, we'll have to get back to you on that.
That one.
Those bad ones.
Those ones.
Yeah.
Well, they can't.
So,
in their defense, they can't. They're not really going to say too much detail either.
And as I've said, I really appreciate the tension that exists. In my reading, I did see somebody, a third party, saying, and this is one of the talking head shows, mentioning that, but one of the smart people saying, the NSA says they can't tell Congress,
right, because
Congress will leak it.
General Clapper said, "I said as much as I could. I was as honest as I could be."
And Leo, I've seen Congress.
Yeah,
they would leak it.
Of course they would.
I wouldn't trust Congress as far as I could throw them.
But that raises the issue of if you can't trust Congress, and who do you trust to do oversight? Somebody has to do oversight, and you can't. And I think it's not unreasonable to say you can't reveal all this stuff publicly. You can't let the American people decide. Their representatives have to decide. This is not. I don't think it's all that clear.
So. Okay, so one thing I wanted I want to get off this topic. Maybe maybe in the new year we'll be able to. No. I mean, like, sort of for in terms of podcast future, because we've beaten this thing to death. But one of the things that annoyed me was the characterization we have seen of Snowden, and we saw it in the 60 Minutes piece. There was the one little anecdotal business about, well, he cheated on a test in order to get hired. And, I understand that the NSA has to paint this person as, a traitor and, like the worst thing that ever happened to national security, and a high school dropout, and, really paint him as badly as possible. But there was a piece that I linked to for anyone who, in Forbes. So this is in Forbes. And this is going a little bit, I think, overboard on the other side, where an NSA coworker, the headline is, remembers the real Edward Snowden as a genius among geniuses. Now, all of our geeks, all of we geeks have mothers who think we're geniuses. So that's sort of, okay, you have to understand, who's doing the thinking here. I'm sure that the janitor in the NSA building thinks that all of the NSA employees are geniuses. But for example, before coming to, and so this is from the interview of an NSA coworker who knew Snowden well, said that before coming to the NSA in Hawaii, Snowden had impressed NSA officials by developing a backup system that the NSA had widely implemented in its code-breaking operations. He also frequently reported security vulnerabilities that he discovered in the NSA's own software, and apparently many of these bugs were never patched. Snowden had been brought to Hawaii as a cybersecurity expert working for Dell's services division, but due to a problem with the contract was reassigned to become an administrator for the Microsoft intranet management system known as SharePoint. Impressed with his technical ability, Snowden's managers decided that he was the most qualified candidate to build a new web front end for one of its projects. Maybe they could get him over on Healthcare.gov. Anyway, despite his contractor status. As his coworker tells it, he was given full administrator privileges with virtually unlimited access to NSA data. Big mistake in hindsight, says Snowden's former colleague, but if you had a guy who could do the things nobody else could, and the only problem was that his badge was green instead of blue, what would you do? As further evidence that Snowden didn't hijack his colleagues' accounts for his leak, which is one of the bogus stories we heard in order to paint him in that light, the NSA staffer points to an occasion when Snowden was given a manager's password so that he could cover for him while the manager was on vacation. Even then, investigators found no evidence Snowden had misused his staffer's privileges, and the source says nothing he could have uniquely accessed from the account has shown up in news reports. Of course, we know that not everything Snowden has shown up in news reports, but still there's another bullet point. Snowden's supervisors were so impressed with his skills that he was at one point offered a position on the elite team of NSA hackers known as Tailored Access Operations, or TAO. He unexpectedly turned it down and instead joined Booz Allen to work at the NSA's Threat Operations Center. Another hint of his whistleblower conscience, aside from the telltale hoodie that he always wear, he wore an EFF hoodie that showed that eagle with its talons holding all the fiber optic cables. So I mean, he was like saying to people, "Look, I'm with a spying organization here, folks." Snowden kept a copy of the Constitution on his desk to cite when arguing against NSA activities he thought might violate it. The source tells the reporter that Snowden also once nearly lost his job standing up for a coworker who was being disciplined by a superior, and this goes on. So my point is that there's ample evidence to say that Snowden had a conscience, that he was demonstrating it at work, and he was characterizing him as a high school dropout who cheated on test in order to get into the NSA is clearly not telling a fair recitation of the facts. So there. Now,
take a sip, everybody.
Maybe we're done with the NSA for 2013. It's been a major topic for 2013. We will try not to have it dominate 2014. But speaking of dominating, I tweeted a neat graphic which popped onto the net last week, showing, I think I tweeted the bots are winning or something to that effect. This is a result of an analysis showing the bot versus human traffic distribution, which is to say the traffic on the internet generated not by human activity, but by automated activity, is in 2012, 51% of the traffic was non-human agents. In 2013, that 51% has expanded to 61.5. So an additional 10% human use is dropped to 38.5.
But that's kind of to be expected. This is machines talk to machines and can do it much more rapidly than a human can.
Yes, and so, for example, search engines of the 61.5, majority of the traffic, 31.1. So half of that, 61.5%, 31% is search engines and other good bots.
And this isn't a surprise to anybody who has their own website, because if you look at the log, there's always a crawler from one of the search engines in our sites. Always. And
in fact, the other day, I looked at my perfect passwords page, which, I'm using a password from my Wi-Fi to protect my various Wi-Fi routers that I got from GRC. I just can't get a more absolutely unbiased random blob designed for Wi-Fi than from GRC. But on the day that I looked at it, there had been like 12,000 average pulls, and it normally runs like 3 or 4. So I'm thinking, okay, it must now be that some automated thing is just going there and sucking a lot of pages in order to collect random noise from GRC. It's like, okay, well, I got to go put a stop to that one of these days. That's not on my priority list. But
what is Netflix? Is that a bot? I mean, if I go watch a stream, is that a human interaction?
I wouldn't think so.
How do they classify that?
Well, so 31% is search engines and other good bots. Then 5% is scrapers, and what I just described was a scraper. Something is scraping my site. I designed this page for one person to go and get one piece of very, very high quality pseudo-random data for their own use. But something I'm thinking is scraping my site. And it's the same way like, Craigslist has complained about scraping. Other people set up bots to go and like scrape it. And eBay has the same problem. So they're scrapers who are pretending to be humans that are collecting data from websites. 5% of the bots are doing that. 4.5% are hacking tools. I don't know what that actually means, what they qualify. 0.5% are spammers. And then 20.5% are called other impersonators. Anyway, just some interesting stats that, over time, clearly human use of the internet is increasing from 2012 to 2013. We know that's increasing. As all of us now have smartphones, there's additional points of entry to the internet, allowing us to use more of our day hooked to the net. So human traffic on the internet is growing, but non-human traffic is growing faster than human traffic, such that, we're losing out as a percentage, which is, interesting. As you said, not unexpected, but to me, the reason it makes sense is there's never been anything more automatable than the internet. It's a bunch of protocols that obey rules. And so, yes, a human running a browser can click a URL and pull up a page, but so can a machine. And so machines are. People have found all kinds of reasons to have machines doing that. I got a bunch of tweets earlier in this week, maybe it was the end of last week, concerned with the news that Google was now displaying images in Gmail. Previously, Google, when you got email that had embedded images, you would have a click to display this image if you want to. So that did a couple things. It saved bandwidth so that you weren't downloading stuff that you didn't care about, but there was also some protection there, because in the same way sort of that NoScript protects you by not loading a script by default on a website you visit, this wasn't loading an image by default on email you were viewing. And, we've spent a lot of time talking about how sad it is, but true, that actual images can be malicious, because the renderers in our computers that convert that image into something we can see, essentially the code representation of the image, JPEG, GIF, whatever, TIFF, into an image, the that rendering code can have buffer overflows, and it's possible to then, if you find a flaw in the rendering, you can craft like a fake image which will deliver malware. So what's very cool about this, so a lot of people were saying, hey Steve, I thought like this was a security problem. And what Google has done is extremely cool. They are proxying images, and here's the key, they are transcoding them. So what this, and there are a number of reasons for doing this, but what that means is essentially Google's own servers are following the link and obtaining the image and interpreting the image, turning it into a graphic. Then they're taking that and re-encoding it as whatever makes sense, a PNG or a JPEG, and then embedding that in your Gmail. So it's now safe for Gmail to display images by default. And so this means a couple things. First of all, that act of transcoding is the best filter you could ever have. For example, I'm using it on GRC's packets. I don't talk about my security technology often, but from the beginning, before I began doing things, I implemented a packet transcoding technology which re-represents the packets in a meta language, and no packets from the outside ever come to the inside of GRC, only transcoded packets. And it's the technology I've never done anything with. I just did it for myself. But it provides protection because you can't, it's like completely sanitizes, in Google's case, an image by discarding the what could be a malicious specific representation and turning it into an image and then re-encoding it. But the other thing Google can do is that many times somebody may send you an image which is like ridiculously high resolution and tens of megabytes in size. So Google, because they're proxying it, is able to, in the transcoding process, is able to essentially recompress it to a size that makes sense. So it comes into Gmail, and you might be able to click on it to get the full size one, but it shows you a nice little thumbnail, much smaller, and at a compression ratio that makes sense for the type of image and your application, which then makes your page load much faster than if your browser was going out and having to download a 20 megabyte photo that somebody sent you in full hyper resolution without reducing it. So it's very cool. And it means a few other things too that they comment in their blog posting where they describe this, and that is that senders cannot use image loading to get information like your IP address, which they otherwise could. If your email is collected by Google, then Google is the store and forward server. But when Gmail comes to your browser and your browser opens it, its requests for images will come from you and not from Google, which means that anyone wanting to track you based on images added to email would be getting queries from your browser at your IP address, and then they would know your location. And they would be able, that would be a cookie transfer. So they'd be able to set and read cookies on your browser through images. Both of those things are thwarted by having Google proxy images in Gmail. So that's also very cool. But the one glitch is if images are tagged with unique file names in their links, then they would still be able to track you that way. That is, if you opened the email and then your browser asked Google for the image by name, then Google would would query the image in order to transcode it and send it back to you. And so there would still be tracking by unique image name, but still, a nice step forward.
And you can disable it. You may ask, well, why would Google spend all the time and money to do this? Because it's expensive. Because they want you to see ads, frankly. And it, they want, I don't really want to see those images. So I've immediately gone into my settings and turned this feature off. I mean, they're not, it's good they're sanitizing it. And I guess for most people, seeing, images in their emails is, kind of better. But I don't want to see ads in my email. Fortunately, you can go into the settings and turn it off, at least for now.
Right. So they flipped it back on, and you can go in and say, no thanks again.
And they do explain there why it's okay now to have images in emails and so forth. They don't have the. I'm curious what this is going to be. Ask before displaying external images. It used to be they wouldn't display them at all. And what I suspect is people like MailChimp and Constant Contact said, hey, we do newsletters with images. You're turning them off without asking. So my suspicion is, we're going to get pestered every time there's an image. You want to see these images? Come on. I know you want to see these images. So,
Yeah.
It's an ad. I love Google. I'm not going to complain about Google. I love Google, but it's an ad company, and this is about commerce.
Yes, and that's exactly it. We are Google's product, as has been said. They're monetizing us, and that's I mean, television does, and so the internet. It's funny.
Twit does. We do. I mean,
yeah. I was commenting to Jen a couple days ago. I stumbled on a site. I don't remember now what it was, but it was clean. It was like GRC, no ads, but obviously it wasn't mine. But I mean, I just looked at it and it's like, wow, and I realized then. Look at what has happened to the typical website. It's just, it's all across the bottom. It's all down the right-hand side, stuff jumping around. And then now, as you scroll down, new things like slide out of the bottom in order to grab your attention. And and I went to some other site that had no ads, and it's just like, oh, gee, it was nice. And so, yeah, it is incredible what's happened to the net. And as you know, I'm sure the file download sites have all just become unusable now too. They're all forcing you to download some intermediate download manager of their own and install junk on your machine other than the file that you're trying to download.
Yeah,
so
there is a difference. There must be a rhetorical. You know how there's names for all sorts of rhetorical tricks. There must be a name for this rhetorical trick. But Leo, says somebody in the chat room, you're always saying it's unethical to use ad blockers. What's the difference? Because it's in my email. That's different. I'm not using a free service like Facebook and saying, well, I don't want to see the ads. This is my email. And I don't want to see bazooms in my email. Thank you very much.
Right.
Off of soapbox.
Right. So, okay. We have to talk about this because everyone's just in a frenzy. What was shown was at this point, a purely academic, theoretical attack. It is definitely interesting, and it's the kind of thing that I love to bring to our listeners because this is the kind of stuff that, really makes a difference in fundamental understanding of security. And this is a group of researchers who published a paper, and in the show notes is the link to it. I'm just going to share their synopsis because they do a perfect job of characterizing this, and we'll talk about it then a little bit. The title of their paper is RSA Key Extraction via Low Bandwidth Acoustic Cryptanalysis. And so they said, many computers emit a high-pitched noise during operation due to vibration in some of their electronic components. And this actually is it's the switching power supply, but we'll talk about more details in a second. These acoustic emanations are more than a nuisance. They can convey information about the software running on the computer, and in particular, leak sensitive information about security-related computations. In a preliminary presentation, we have shown that different RSA keys induce different sound patterns, but it was not clear how to extract individual key bits. The main problem was that the acoustic side channel has a very low bandwidth, naturally, because it's basically an audio carrier. So variations in the audio carrier are going to be limited to the carrier's frequency, which is on the order of 20 kilohertz, which is like the switching power supply frequency. So that's why some of us can still hear those switching power supplies. And then so they say, and of course, they're limited by microphone bandwidth. They say under 20 kilohertz using common microphones and a few hundred kilohertz using ultrasound microphones. Many orders of magnitude below the gigahertz scale clock rates of the attacked computers. Here, we describe a new acoustic cryptanalysis key extraction attack applicable to GNU PG's current implementations of RSA. They were actually able to extract GPG RSA keys. The attack can extract full 4096-bit RSA decryption keys from laptop computers of various models within an hour, using the sound generated by the computer during the decryption of some chosen plain texts. We experimentally demonstrate that such attacks can be carried out using either a plain microphone planted next to the computer or a more sensitive microphone placed 4 meters away. Beyond acoustics, we demonstrate that a similar low bandwidth attack can be performed by measuring the electric potential of a computer chassis. A suitably equipped attacker need merely touch the target computer with his bare hand or get the required leakage information from the ground wires at the remote end of VGA, USB, or Ethernet cables. Oh my Lord. So anyway, we've talked often about side channel attacks. This is clearly really cool low bandwidth side channel attack, basically using things the machine does. Apparently vibration is another one. So and sound is one, and subtle variations in the electric potential between the machine's ground. So essentially, when you have an algorithm, a cryptographic algorithm, where secret information changes what the machine does even in subtle ways, that is detectable. It varies the load that the processor puts on the power supply. Varying the load that the processor puts on the power supply varies the ground reference of the machine, just by microvolts, but enough that you can detect it, and it will vary the strain on the power supply that changes the sound that the power supply makes. And so technically, it's all leaking information. It's one of the reasons, and I've mentioned this before, that the elliptic curve technology that I chose was deliberately designed by Dan Bernstein to have none of its secret information involved in any branch decisions or changing the flow of the machine in any way. So it is side channel neutral, but it's very difficult to write code that way and takes an extra effort. What we're seeing is it is incredibly important to do this. We talked last week or the week before about another attack, which was using variations in the code flow which changed the caching of code and data in the microprocessor. And so malware running in the same processor but in a completely different virtual machine, but like in an Amazon, shared hosting environment, could obtain cryptographic information from other processors running in the machine. Now, okay, so the reason we don't have to all run around with our hair on fire is, this was an academic demonstration. First of all, the machine could not be doing anything else at the same time. It was absolutely set up so that it was only doing this crypto using chosen plain text over and over and over and over and over. So, I mean, that's all it was doing with no contention. If you were in a typical laptop where, you've got all kinds of annoying stuff connected to the internet, downloading stuff and updating and, and other tasks happening at the same time, all of this goes out the window. Now, that's not to say it's then impossible, but it's very much like, if everyone in a coffee shop, like in Starbucks, was absolutely quiet and one person was talking to someone else, you could hear their conversation across the room. Whereas if everyone is talking to someone else, yes, that original conversation is still there. It's part of the mix of what you're hearing, but oh my Lord, distinguishing it from the cacophony is vastly more difficult. So similarly, in any real-world situation, it's going to be much more difficult to extract keys. But this has been a recent focus of cryptographic work, the nature of side channel attacks. And so what we're going to be seeing in the future are going to be explicitly side channel safe crypto. I'm already using it. Other people are going to have to start using it just so that you're safe against these kind of attacks, because they're inherently stealthful. You just, it's machines and processors and boxes and hardware that you may have no control over whatsoever, that are unintentionally changing what they do. I mean, it's like the fundamental nature of the way the processors function is leaking this information. So now we have to start designing crypto so that it is side channel safe against these kinds of attacks. But this was, wow, really interesting.
Well, you've heard of Van Eck phreaking, right? This has been since the 80s.
Yeah. Well, and remember, Leo, being an old-timer like me, we used to put AM radios on the top of mini computers and would write code with different lengths of loops in order to generate different frequencies, and then play Christmas carols and things, back in the old days. And so this is the same sort of thing. There it was the core memory. The nature of the way it operated was pulses of current through loops of wire, and that was inherently generating radio frequencies, all over the AM band. I mean, basically, you couldn't listen to an AM radio inside of a computer shop, and so we would tune the radio to some place where we'd get a good internet modulation, and you could play music from a computer, even though it had no sort of interface at all. It was just generating. You could get it to generate deliberately really strong RF emissions.
There's a scene in Cryptonomicon where somebody uses Van Eck phreaking to see what's on somebody's monitor through a hotel wall, because the radiation from a monitor does travel through a wall.
Yeah,
that's why you have a tempest. That's why there's a tempest specification for highly
back
secure.
then when you had big CRTs that were scanning, you could they were sending out the contents of their screen moment to moment.
Right. Hey, we have a winner in the Mega Millions lottery. I'm surprised you don't have this in your notes, because you're big on math. Apparently, there are a lot of people confused about math. Mega Millions, if they hadn't had a winner, would have gone to over or close to $1 billion in the lottery prize on Friday, which means everybody was buying a ticket. But one of the reasons they hadn't had winners in so long is because they made the odds literally astronomical. You're more likely to get hit by an asteroid, literally more likely to get hit by an asteroid than win the Mega Millions lottery.
And that's way more likely than you are to have a collision of a 256-bit
Right.
number.
Since you love these big numbers, they changed the, I forgot what it is. I think you have to pick 15 numbers between 1 and 75, and then a 6.
And get them all?
Yeah, and then pick, and then pick a 16th that's only one between 1 and 15. Get them all to win. The odds are so huge. I'm surprised there was a winner. But apparently somebody did pick it in Georgia. 1 in 75, 15 times.
Yow.
That's a big number.
That's a big number.
We have a winner. I don't think it's, somebody does win, and that's why people do it. All right,
that's
on with the show.
1.6 times 10 to the 88th. Just for
I don't
those
know how
15.
they got a win. How did somebody win? They must have. I don't even understand how somebody won that.
Oh no, wait. So 1 to 75, 15 times. Sorry, one.
I'm sorry.
3.
I have not ever purchased a lottery ticket or a lotto ticket in my life, but
Nor
somebody's
I.
corrected me that there are 5, not 15. So 1 to 75, 5. Is that really right? I thought it was harder than that.
Wow,
It's still
that
pretty-
begin to seem reasonable because
'cause
Leo,
you
that
make it
other
too
number,
hard.
that other number was
You make it
just
too hard.
beyond.
Apparently, they have 2 winners. They've announced 2 winners in the $636 million jackpot. Yeah, it's 5 numbers. So you have
Okay, so now we're
8,
at
14, 17, 20, 39, and a mega ball of 7.
Okay, so we're at 2.373 billion combinations. 1 in 2.373 billion.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
That's
Your odds were not good. But, people buy enough tickets, somebody's going to win.
so.
Anyway, on with the show. Sorry.
Microsoft made a bunch of news by their joining the FIDO Alliance.
What's that?
And that's something that I'd never really looked at much. Stina at Yubico always talks about FIDO Alliance whenever we're together. And, it is a big, slow-moving bunch of committees. To give you a sense for it, you have to pay $25,000 a year in dues in order to join. And it's, so it's like, okay. And it's what Google, Google is now involved. And what they have is 2 different authentication proposals. And, so these are like big lumbering committees. And Google has this thing, and I'm sure you're aware of it. They're using YubiKeys internally and they've come up with a second factor authentication technology using YubiKeys, and I think they've got custom plugins for Chrome that works with it and so forth. So people have asked, where is that relative to Squirrel? And I had no idea. So I did a little poking around. I've got links in the show notes if anyone wants to get details. Google has posted, they had a project called, I guess you'd pronounce it Nubby, Gnubby, which was their working name, which is their OAuth technology. And they were calling it Universal Second Factor, U2F. And there are some similarities to Squirrel. That is, the system that I've designed. And frankly, we solved many problems they haven't solved. There's like Squirrel is superior, but that doesn't mean it's going to win. I was initially a little saddened when I looked at what they were doing because it wasn't really good. For example, their system requires that the thing that you have to have like a YubiKey, and it has to have storage, which stores keys for every site. Well, that's one of the coolest things about Squirrel is you don't have to have any, it doesn't have any state in it like per site. It generates it on the fly. And then when they were trying to make these things cheaper, because they're saying, well, this will cost many tens of dollars. And so that's the other problem is that naturally you've got a lot of entrenched biases. Like Google wants to protect their ecosystem. Yubico wants to sell tokens. Everyone has their territory to protect. And so and this thing, the spec is really over-designed. I mean, at one point there's like a certificate signing request being sent back and forth. And it's like, it's like the kind of thing you do when you register certs with a certificate authority and you want them to sign your certificate. So one of the problems is it'll never be free because it's tied to a physical token.
So it couldn't use like Google Authenticator. Well,
for example, you can't use Apple iOS ecosystem because it's also all near field.
No wonder Microsoft loves it. That explains a lot.
It's all near. It's
dead on the water. Then you've got 400 million devices it won't work with.
Right, and Squirrel, of course, will work with everything. Right. So when I realized, first I realized there's a whole bunch of things we did right. Also, we've solved the key lifetime, what we call key lifetime management, where if worst happened and someone did steal your identity, Squirrel gives you control so you can get it back. You can actually get it back from a hacker who has stolen it. And there's nothing like that in FIDO. So, or in the FIDO proposal. So and then this other thought I had was, okay, not only is Squirrel better, I mean, much easier to implement, much simpler, much more clearly, like much clearer about how it works, but it's free. And it'll work on all devices. And it's truly free. You don't have to buy anything. It doesn't need near field technology, so you can use it on Apple mobile devices. But also, it could, if FIDO ended up happening, there's nothing to prevent them from cohabitating. I mean, like if people wanted to use the free one, which is arguably better, we'll have that too. And it's so simple for a website to implement Squirrel, and everyone's writing libraries now for all the different major platforms that it'll be easy to add it. So it's like, okay, Microsoft and Google and all these other people are welcome to do that, and I imagine that Squirrel will not be kept from existing just because there's something else.
Good. Although, as we know in the tech industry, best technology does not always win. In fact, it often doesn't.
That's true.
Win.
And if it doesn't take off, well, I'll use it, and other people will use it, and I will given my expression for here's how you solve the problem the right way, and anyone who looks at it will go, wow, this solves the problem, and it'll just be there. It'll be free. So we'll see what happens. I am not discouraged. And Lord knows, I mean, I'm writing code. I assembled all of the crypto libraries and got them running on my tool chain, which is earlier than everyone else's. So I'm deep into it now, and am moving ahead. So as are a bunch of other people who now, because the spec is finalized. I had a pro forma finalization I talked about last Wednesday. We're done. It has been settled. The semantics and the syntax are finished, and everyone's writing code. So I think we'll have something here in probably in a couple weeks.
So we talked last week about Healthcare.gov.
Yes, and what was funny was completely unsolicited, our wonderful podcast transcriber, Elaine, was listening to the podcast, as she is forced to do, whether actually I think she really enjoys it because she is a geek and self-ascribed. And so when she sent me back the transcripts, text files in email like Thursday night late, she wrote, Steve, I'm too sleepy to go into detail right now, but you might want to relax a bit. Now, okay, remember what I did last week. First question we answered was, why haven't we ever talked about the security catastrophe of Healthcare.gov? And I gave everybody who thought that we were afraid to talk about it a nice rant about, don't even talk to me about the security. It's just, it has to be the worst disaster anyone's ever imagined. So Elaine says, I'm too sleepy to go into detail right now, but you might want to relax a wee bit about the healthcare thing. And by the way, I should tell you, I have her permission, as you'll see in a second, to repeat this. She says, I got it. It's painless. They ask for less information than any utility company, and the website's just to allow you to compare plans available in your area. You pick one. They send your name and address to the insurance company, who sends you an invoice for the first month's premium, and that's it. You're done with the website, and you don't have to give a credit card number or any medical information.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes. Now, we should also remember, though, she's in California.
Oh, she's not using the federal site.
Correct.
She's using the state site. She
says, I'm tickled pink because I haven't had insurance for nearly 20 years.
What? What?
And I'm about to need eye surgery.
Oh, boy.
She's
been very lucky.
She said, your major disastrous catastrophe, she says to me, that's what I was calling it, she says, is my godsend. Although we were, of course, as again, we're talking about different implementations. We're talking about Healthcare.gov national, and she's in California, so I'm presuming she's using whatever the California site is. So I asked Elaine whether she would mind my sharing her real-world experience with our podcast audience, and she replied, I don't mind at all. I just tried to tell my farrier, and I thought, what's a farrier? And I knew that Elaine would not have a typo. And that's somebody.
It's a horseshoer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Elaine has a horseshoer, but she has no health care.
Hey, if you have horses, you got to buy them shoes. Baby needs new shoes.
Yes. So she just says, I just tried to tell my farrier I got health insurance, and parens, he got dropped last year and has 2 people with heart conditions in his family.
Oh, that's why he got dropped.
And he just went nuts on me, a la Fox News. So any little bit of truth and balance
he's upset
is a good thing.
Because there's national health care, but he got canceled last year. I don't understand.
Yeah, well, people will vote against their interests, unfortunately.
Yeah,
we see that all the time. Yeah. So she says, it's not spectacular news like the woman who got a family policy for $3.16 or the person who got billed 13 cents, but it feels very solid and real to me. I'm getting a $580 per month policy for $170 per month with reasonable deductibles.
That's not bad.
And then she said, actually, now I'm thinking it would be great, in all caps, if you did mention it. I'm sure lots of geeks like me have small incomes and or have suffered catastrophe. Remember the listener from New Orleans who wrote after Katrina. You've got listeners in New England who suffered through Sandy. There must have been listeners in Colorado who lost big time in last summer's flood.
Absolutely.
Not every working mother is the CEO of Yahoo, and the recession still exists for lots of us. Healthcare is a definite bright spot. So anyway, she said, along with those same lines, you can buy refurbished computers at cedarpc.com, CEDARPC.com, for $200 to $300, desktops or laptops. You could do a little in case you've been struck by disaster segment. And so we just did.
Very good.
A number of people have asked for GRC's SSL TLS Cipher suite ordering. That is, I talked about it, how when I decided that I no longer had to worry about Beast, and I could now use an ordering of Cipher suites that would put perfect forward secrecy at the top of the list. Many people said, "Ooh, I'd love to see what you chose," because what I did was I went through for Windows Server 2008 R2, which is I'm using. I went through all the available Cipher suites very carefully and very deliberately ordered them from most secure to least secure. It's a long. I have it in a directory on SSL. So I didn't bother making a Bitly link or anything. But anyone who is interested, I did tweet it, I think, but it's in the show notes. So go to grc.com/SN. The show notes are now always the third icon over, and it's there. So anyone who wants to is welcome to grab them. And actually, it's the text file. You just make it one long. I have line breaks in it to make it easier to read, but you take the line breaks out, and you can drop that directly into Windows Server, and it becomes your Cipher suite order. Also, I was preparing actually a list of ebooks for Bob, my friend, whom you remember, Leo, up in Vancouver. And I ran across my directory of Honor Harrington books. And Bayan Books is the publisher, but these are all non-DRM, freely downloadable from Bayan's site. Although their site is a disaster to navigate. And they even have like an ISO image you can download with all of the books on it. But they're hard to find. So I thought, what the heck? I'll just make them available and number them, because the proper sequence is also not clear. And there's 13 of them in the main sequence of Honor Harrington novels. So I have them on GRC. I tweeted it late last week, and the server really, they're large downloads. So I saw the effect at GRC. Many people were saying, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. So again, the links are in the show notes, but I did create shortcuts. It's bit.ly, bit.ly/H, lowercase Kindle, if you want the Mobi format that run on the Kindle machines, or again, bit.ly, bit.ly/H, lowercase iTunes, if you want the EPUB versions. And so I continue to think that it's one of the best series of military, really beautiful military and sort of political sci-fi intrigue, which I really enjoyed. And last thing up is just a note for people who are interested that an interesting looking new series is premiering January 7th on CBS called Intelligence. I have a YouTube link in the show notes, and I did tweet it, and it's fabulous looking. Again, I'm beggars can't be choosers. I'm not suggesting that it's like the end of everything we could ever ask for from sci-fi. We're just not going to get that for free on broadcast TV. But this looks extremely good. It's the show's called Intelligence, and apparently a chip is implanted in a guy that wires him into the internet, so he's able to access, basically.
Is that available now?
Oh, well, it's very much. This is the technology in Peter Hamilton's Commonwealth universe,
right,
where you just have access to your own data store, but also Marge Helgenberger. Is that how you pronounce her name? She's in there.
Idea.
She used to be on CSI Vegas for a while, and anyway, extremely good. And my server is definitely showing the effect right now, Leo, of people grabbing the Honor Harrington novels. So I'm glad people like it. Anyway, definitely very cool.
Very good.
And I have a nice note from a Microsoft certified systems engineer that I ran across in my mailbag when I was pulling Q&A for the show. He said, Steve, I'm a Microsoft certified systems engineer. Today, I restarted an older laptop of mine, a Dell Latitude D820, that had been running Windows XP without problems for years. This morning, it was locked up. So I thought to myself, okay, a reboot is required. But then the laptop gave me the dreaded blue screen of death 3 times, even after the last known good configuration was selected at reboot. Oh dear, he writes. It was a 0.5 terabyte hard drive, and because this laptop does a lot of stuff in the background on my home network, I dreaded the thought of having to replace the laptop or hard drive and getting everything reinstalled again. So I decided to try the SpinRite disk I bought from GRC a couple of months ago. After 2 hours, it reported that Sector 125 were unrecoverable, And he says 1-2-5. So maybe that's sectors 1, 2, and 5, or I'm not sure because he says were as opposed to sector 125. He says, I was crushed. I thought my life is chaos now. I crossed my fingers and prayed. When SpinRite finished and I checked again, SpinRite reported that there were no unrecoverable errors. What? How can that be? I asked myself. But sure enough, on further inspection, SpinRite reported that there were no abnormal sectors on the hard drive. So there I sat, after a total of 3 hours, hoping that SpinRite would salvage more than my day. Once again, I crossed my fingers and removed the SpinRite boot disk and restarted the laptop. Steve, thanks for such a great hard drive maintenance and recovery software. It took only 3 hours or so to recover this hard drive, and SpinRite saved me many more hours of reinstallation and possibly relicensing software. From this day forward, SpinRite will be a part of my normal backup routine. So just another happy SpinRite customer.
They're all happy-go-lucky SpinRite customers here in SpinRite world. So are you ready? We have questions.
We do. Yes.
Wow.
Absolutely.
We got 15 minutes.
We'll get through some of them.
Well, I am perfectly happy to do as many as you choose at the time of your choosing. Question 1 from Richard. He asks about running SpinRite in a virtual machine. That's interesting. My TiVo recently stopped working. I put the TiVo's 320 gig hard drive into my PC so SpinRite could fix it. It ran on a level 2 scan twice. SpinRite found and recovered data from bad sectors on both passes. The number of bad sectors found on the second pass was fewer, but they still were present. So I decided to run a deeper level 4 scan to really root out the problems. After I started the scan, SpinRite reported it was estimating 30 hours to complete the scan. I let it go overnight, but since I needed my computer back for the work week, I had to stop at the level 4 scan at about 50%. I then got to wondering, can I run SpinRite in a virtual machine so that I could use my PC? Because SpinRite runs in a DOS box or a free DOS box. So he wants to know, could he do that and still get to use Windows? He says he found your tweet from January with a link to a step-by-step instructions on how to use VirtualBox, the free VM, for just such a task. I got VirtualBox installed and configured and started a level 4 scan on the TiVo hard drive. To my amazement, the level 4 scan was flying. Then after the usual 60-second sampling, the estimated time populated, it said it would only need about 4 hours. I verified that level 4 was in fact running. It was. So that long who-round is all to the point of saying, does running SpinRite in a virtual machine cause it to run better than booting it from a CD? This is the same hardware. Is SpinRite really working? We're running in the VM? Maybe it was just making up those numbers. 7-fold increase in speed. What's the story?
Okay, so I wanted to, this is a great case in point for what essentially is a tip for anyone who is wanting to run SpinRite at maximum speed on a motherboard BIOS that won't run at maximum speed. And that is SpinRite 6 today. What happened is that Richard has a BIOS that is not doing Ultra DMA by itself. And SpinRite 6 famously still runs through the BIOS. Many people have motherboards with BIOSes that natively supports Ultra DMA transfers, in which case SpinRite gets the advantage of that and runs at full speed. I'm blanking. The VirtualBox virtual machine that Richard was using, and VirtualBox has a state-of-the-art virtual BIOS. So you can run SpinRite in a VirtualBox VM, and it will be guaranteed to run at full SpinRite 6 speed, which, as you can see, is in this case, was 7 times faster than on that particular motherboard. So this was an interaction between SpinRite 6's use of the BIOS and the fact that motherboard wasn't doing Ultra DMA. Many other motherboards do Ultra DMA, in which case SpinRite always runs at that speed without putting it in a VM. And of course, all of the reason everyone's excited about SpinRite 6.1 is we'll always get that speed because I will no longer be using the BIOS on any platforms. And in fact, we'll get a lot more speed because I'll be talking natively to the drives and using a 32 megabyte buffer. I don't remember now the benchmarks that we were making back when I was working on 6.1 before suspending that to get Squirrel finished. But it was, I remember that what I remember was a 4 terabyte drive we would then be able to do overnight. So you'd be able to run SpinRite on a full 4 terabytes like overnight. SpinRite 6 won't run that fast because it doesn't use a large enough buffer to do that, but it can run at maximum speed in a VirtualBox VM. So people sometimes say, hey, Steve, I'm creating a machine that I want to use just to run SpinRite on. And so absolutely setting it up with VirtualBox and seeing whether it runs faster in VirtualBox than it does natively is something worthwhile because VirtualBox has a very good virtual BIOS that it brings along.
That's cool.
Isn't that neat? Yeah.
But so the BIOS will work on a hardware-connected drive. It's not working on the virtual machine hard drive. Because the VM has its own hard drive that's a pseudo hard drive.
Actually, one of the things that the VirtualBox allows you to do is to get direct access to a drive.
Ah, that's cool.
Yes. Yeah. So you could not get direct access to the system drive because that's the one that it's running on itself. Yeah. But you can get physical hard. I mean, even VMware will allow you to do that if you're careful. So the various virtual technologies give you direct access.
Raw mode, basically.
Yes, exactly. And then so when SpinRite makes its calls to what it thinks is the BIOS, it's of course the virtual machine BIOS, and the virtual machine BIOS is a very nicely recently written BIOS that then gives SpinRite DMA, ultra DMA access to that physical hard drive. So I mean, you're really running SpinRite raw, and you're really running a state-of-the-art BIOS. So it's a really great solution.
Cool. Stephen Adams, Aurora, Illinois, highlights probability versus possibility. This has something to do with the Mega Millions jackpot, I suspect.
Yes, it does.
I fully understand the concept of extremely low probability events and the fact that 256 bits provides extreme protection against collision. We're talking about BitTorrent Sync, of course, once again. But it does not prevent collision, as you've stated, and I agree. That said, it is a...
Yes. So BitTorrent Sync, Bitcoin, and Squirrel, for example,
all use the same thing.
All use 256 bits. Yes. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That said, it is a fallacy to state that collisions cannot happen, as you and Leo did. I did not say that. I'm going to defend myself. I know the difference between probability and impossibility.
We were actually laughing.
I think we were joking.
Yes, we were saying we were laughing, saying it will not. It cannot happen, but
it could. Yes. Extremely low probability, he points out, does not equate with impossibility. Steve, you should know better. No, I added that part. While we calculate the mean time to solve something by brute force, it is entirely possible that the very first attempt succeeds. Look, 3 people won the Mega Millions. The odds against this are long, assuming a large enough range to guess from, but they are non-zero. Because they're non-zero, it's entirely possible, though highly unlikely, that 2 people will have the same key. And frankly, all it takes is an error in a pseudo-random number generator to create the collision. One mistake by a programmer, and all of a sudden we have collisions and chaos. Since we can't review every single PRNG that's used by every single software that generates these random strings, he says stings, we are subject to the skills of at least the capable or at least careful coder. Of the least capable or least careful coder. And we see where this has taken us in the past. It's obvious this guy has no sense of humor. It's pretty clear from security now that such errors are all too common. To summarize, a pure brute force attack is unlikely to succeed, but it is, and I highlight this in bold, possible that it will. A collision for a properly created pseudo-random number generator is unlikely, but possible. An error by a programmer is very possible. This could easily create such collisions. Fundamentally, the point is low probability does not equal impossibility, and when human actions are involved, counting on what amounts to security by obscurity is a bad idea. Signed, guy with little sense of humor, Stephen Adams in Aurora, Illinois.
Okay, so yes, obviously we all know what Stephen said.
Yes.
The reason I selected this was that first of all, he's very correct about the extreme dependence we have on the quality of pseudo-random numbers. We've talked, for example, about the surprising discovery by the EFF's observatory that completely unrelated servers were using the same private keys without knowing it, because the technology that they have is that they generate the private key themselves, and then they send the public key off to the certificate authority to have that signed. Basically, they generate a certificate which asserts their identity with their public key. The certificate authority signs it and returns it. So what this says is that multiple servers around the world generated the same, chose for themselves the same private key. So so the lesson to we who have a stake in using 256-bit strings for our identity, for our Bitcoin wallet, for our private BitTorrent network or BitSync is we really, really do. And so this is a good point Stephen makes. We really, really do need high quality random numbers. Probably what happened in the cases of those surprising, I mean, these are, probably what, 128-bit private, no, I'm sorry. They're RSA keys. So they're probably 1024-bit RSA keys. So, so these were probably servers that were powered up or booted and hadn't had a chance yet to acquire much entropy from the universe, from the random timings of packets, from noise that they had access to, whatever they were doing to mature their entropy pool. And we've talked about that recently. They just didn't have much time. They probably got booted and somebody said, make me a key. And so they did the best job they could with what low relative level of entropy they had. And sure enough, multiple servers with the same OSs running the same key generator, running the same random number generator, started off having an entropy collision and gave the same key. So it's definitely important. I mean, for example, we see this in TrueCrypt, where TrueCrypt makes you move your mouse around a lot. That's just to, enhance the entropy so you're not all, depending upon it from a single source. And listeners will remember how I was talking about in SquirRel, in a mobile phone setting, I'll have you, wave your phone around in the air while we're streaming video from the lens into a hash to create a fabulously random pool, which we mix with what entropy we get from the platform we're running on in order to get a really, really random identity for users of SquirRel. So, there are certainly ways to do this, but, turning a computer on and immediately having it generate a key with a limited entropy pool is obviously it's going to be prone to collision. And so, he's right that it is something that we need to look at. And the second thing is, I just want to mention that we're all there's the thing that makes some people uncomfortable when they say, yeah, but my BitTorrent sync could collide with somebody else, in which case, then I'd be like, I'd have the key to their network. And, and my Bitcoin wallet could collide, in which case I'd have somebody else's wallet. And so the reason that this is like the new model, this is the model we're heading towards, is that, and SquirRel is the same way, is that there is no central authority. There is no when you ask, does anyone else have this key? You don't ask, does somebody else have my Bitcoin wallet key? You don't ask, does somebody else have my BitTorrent sync key? There is no one to ask. It's a decentralized model. when you sign up for email, you put your email, and many times people have signed up like for Yahoo email, and that's why you see names, like Steve Gibson 327. It's because Steve Gibson nothing through 326 were already taken. So when you have a central authority, you're able to ask it, is this account name available? And then it says, oh, no, you got to choose something else. I mean, same thing for like when people sign up for Twitter. It's like, oh, darn, I can't use that. I can't use that. I can't use that. I can't use that. Oh, finally, here's one I can use. But in this next generation, no third party decentralized model, what we rely on is just the vastness of the key space and the quality of the entropy that we're able to generate. And so everyone doing this really needs to pay attention to entropy quality. And really, operating systems should flatly refuse to generate entropy until they've had enough until they've accumulated enough to be confident that they have it. And clearly, that was not done in the past. It's something that we're seeing now.
So just as an example, if you have a Schlage lock on your door, there are, it's 1 in a million that somebody has a similar key.
Oh,
so
I think it's lower than that,
It might even be
Leo.
lower than that. There's some difference of opinion on how much.
you get the birthday scenario. If you have a bunch of people all trying a given lock, the chances are rather high that you'll just have a collision.
So you should just go around trying your key and
because I mean, look, there's the tumbler with 6 pins, and they don't have that many positions each.
Right. So yeah, exactly. Probably in the hundreds of thousands at most.
No, I'm sorry, 5 pins.
Some have 5, some have 6. Yeah, Quickset has 5. Schlags have 6, I think. Actually, both Quickset and Schlage have 5 and 6 pin. So
and they can't have that many positions because you need to be able to tolerate key wear over time and not have them, constantly going out of alignment. And they don't. They're pretty tolerant.
That's why it's so easy to pick a lock.
Yeah.
Moving along to question 3, Marcus in Corona, California discusses the power of the pointer. He's apparently been taking a course in computer programming. But he says, I'm somewhat dyslexic and mostly an auditory learner. My instructor does almost no lecturing and expects us to read the book and come to class with that week's subject fully understood. Well, what does the instructor do then? But I was having a lot of trouble with pointers, a lot of trouble. Yeah, this is one of the first subjects you come up against in programming that can be a little confusing. I've been listening to Security Now for over a year. I always listen to the current week's episode and a few old ones in between. Well, almost right on cue for my exam. I happened to listen to episode 237 like 4 years ago, which is where you explain the fundamentals of programming. Long story short, I passed the test thanks to the podcast. I just want to let you know that no matter how old Security Now gets, its content will always be relevant, and that goes for you and Leo, too. Just kidding. Hey, that's awesome. He figured out pointers because of you.
So this was a perfect opportunity for me to bow at the altar of the pointer.
It's a magical thing, isn't it?
Oh, my goodness. It is. I've once said, I was quoted somewhere saying that God is 6 levels of indirection.
I don't know what it means, but I like it. A pointer is 1 level of indirection, right?
Correct. The idea is, and the thing that is confusing to new programmers is, does a variable contain the thing or a pointer to the thing? And there's nothing to prevent it being a pointer to the thing, or a pointer to a pointer to a pointer to the thing. And in my programming experience, whenever I have carefully set up structures that have meaning, and the structures contain pointers to other things, and then I have a pointer to that structure, it's like, I mean, I've only ever gone like 3 levels of indirection. That's why I say God is 6. Every time I code this way, I find myself, I just get a chill. It's just like, wow, that it is such a powerful way of working. And I think it's powerful because pointers are the way we humans think. You know, we use nouns to represent something. That's a pointer to an object, is a noun. You know, a grammatical pointer. And
as the Zen Buddhist would say, the finger pointing at the moon is not the moon.
Correct.
Yes.
Anyway, so I loved his note that he understood pointers, or he, thanks to the podcast, and I probably maybe swooned over them back in episode 234. I don't remember, but I just posted something this morning in the SquirRel development news group that the next thing I will do is I'm going to write a library. Now that I've got all the crypto code assembled and linked, I'll write a library that for SquirRel's low-level plumbing, where I pass a structure containing pointers to strings to a function. So I'll give the function a pointer to the structure, and that will contain pointers to strings. And I mean, that's the way I'm going to set it up. And it's the way you do things now. And it makes for such an elegant description of real world stuff. So I bow to the altar of pointers.
First experienced those in Peaks and Pokes on the Atari 800.
Yeah.
And then pointers. And then the next thing that you got to get is recursion. That's even a little bit harder. And then the thing I'm still stuck on is lambdas or closures, which are anonymous functions, and that I just don't understand at all.
And
if I'd taken Calculus 3, maybe I would.
The other thing that object-oriented programming introduces, because basically what I was just describing was technically object-oriented programming.
That's right. Yeah.
But it gets kind of freaky when your structures can contain pointers to functions, not just pointers to like variables or strings, but you can actually have a pointer to a function, and that can change depending upon, like the type of value that
that's now you're getting the lambdas.
It gets pretty hairy.
I don't want to go to lambdas. Thank you.
You can get lost.
Great. That's a nice. Thank you for that. That's a nice email. Here's a gripe though. A complaint from Geek Wrench in Chino Hills, California. I use NoScript religiously on my laptop. I guess he prays every time he uses it. I don't know. This means that when I watch Security Now on my laptop, most of the JavaScript is blocked. It takes time for my old machine to load the show, so I do other things. If I so happen to make the mistake of allowing scripts on another page, it dumps the whole show, and I have to wait for it to reload all over again. Last week, I got frustrated and never bothered to finish. This is our fault? Is there a way to allow NoScript in a single tab? Oh, that's an interesting idea. Or do I just need to continually mentally flogging Leo? Now, you see why I have a crappy job. Because some guy has a crappy browser and an old machine and dumps and he blames me.
Okay, newsflash, Geek Wrench.
He's blaming me.
You right-click on the NoScript icon, and where it says temporarily trust twit.tv, right below it, it says always trust twit.tv.
We're
and
safe.
That's the key.
He doesn't want to do that, apparently.
No, I just think he hasn't seen that or hasn't noticed it. So it is, and so what happens is NoScript then remembers that you trust twit.tv. And so, for example, my NoScript never bothers me because it knows I trust Amazon, I trust Google, I trust, the various sites that require scripting that I'm a repeat visitor to. I don't trust anything by default, but I've trained NoScript over time. And sometimes I'll be at a site and like GitHub, for example, and I'll think, is this worth trusting? Because I'm adding a permanent entry in a database somewhere inside of NoScript to say, let's always trust GitHub. And I thought, no, I don't. I'm happy to trust it on the fly rather than permanently. But that's a huge feature of NoScript that apparently just missed your attention. And so I wanted to call your attention to it. Trust twit.tv, and you're good to go. No more problems.
Somebody said TNOEL, trust no one except Leo. Hey, this is going to be a holiday gift I just got from Scott Evest. You might be interested in these blackout pockets. You can put it has RFID, or actually it's basically
drop your cell phone in
a Faraday cage in a bag.
Very cool.
Yeah, so it blocks cell phone signals. It blocks RFID, so if you have a passport or a credit card, you can't be skimmed or hacked. And so you just put this. It has Velcro on the back, so you just stick it into your Scott Evest, and they have 3 levels of protection.
There was something I saw recently. Gosh, I think it was a video, or maybe it was a TV show or something, where everyone entering a conference room had to drop their phones in like a box.
Yeah,
and then the lid was closed. Yeah. And
Snowden did that too. Snowden would,
offline.
When Greenwald went to talk to Snowden, he said, "Put your cell phone in the fridge." Same thing. Okay,
you're right. We did talk about this. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Oh, and people were saying, okay, put it in the microwave, but do not turn the microwave on.
Yeah, because a microwave is a Faraday cage. Otherwise, the high frequency waves would fry your brain when you peered in to see if your hot pocket was done. Ari in South Africa asks a fundamental NAT question. Never mind. Addressable something thingamajig. Hey, Steve, Wait a minute, now I'm going to have to think of it. Network address translation. Thank you. Please, could you clarify some basic network address translation concepts pertaining to what a NAT router is expected to do with IP addresses of packets it lets through outbound? See device bypasses NAT router post in grc.security. Thanks and best regards, Ari.
Okay, so we haven't talked about NAT routing technology for a long time, and I don't want to bore our old timers who are like rolling their eyes because it's like, oh, come on, talk about something we don't know. But I know that we're constantly getting new people on the podcast also. So I won't spend too much time on this, but the way what NAT routers do with the IP addresses of packets they let through outbound is remember them. And this is the whole beauty of why a NAT router is such good security. Normally, there's just junk arriving at everyone's IP address all the time. I've coined the term IBR, Internet Background Radiation. That's what it is. It's code red bots, NIM bots and nonsense they're living on forever and will never go away, scanning the internet. They're, spam bots and just every kind of thing you could think of, just checking ports on your IP to see if maybe you've got that port open. The idea is that they're all coming from random IP addresses that your router knows nothing about. So when they arrive at the router, it looks in a table to see whether it's expecting anything from that IP address on that port, and or like from that IP address, from that port, and to your specific port that it's addressed to. And if not, if there isn't a match, it just drops the packet. The packet just dies. I mean, it's just data arriving. It's not like they're pointy and they're going to like pierce the router or somehow work their way in. It just ignores it. But if you send a packet from inside your network out through the router takes note of the destination IP and port and the source port that it's emitting the packet from its IP, and off the packet goes out onto the internet. Then when that destination sends the packet back, it'll match up with an entry. It left an entry in this table. So this packet comes back amid all the other noise that's trying to get in, but that particular packet came from an IP address and a port destined for a port on the router that the router expected. So that one gets let back through. And that's how NAT works. Yeah. It's fabulous fundamental firewalling technology.
Basically, it will continue a conversation started from within the network and ignore
Yes.
any attempts to start a conversation without the network, unless
you can
otherwise
kind of
instructed.
think of it like a one-way valve. It allows data and transactions outwards, but blocks anything unexpected, unsolicited, as I use the phrase all over the place, coming back in.
You know, do you have any one in particular we want to do? Because we're kind of out of time here.
I think we've got a
some
good
good
podcast
stuff. Yeah.
behind us. Yes, very much.
And we'll leave some more questions for later. You can always ask Steve questions at his website, grc.com/feedback. Do not email him. Do not email. He doesn't even. You don't.
I don't
even
have.
know
I don't
his
have
address.
email.
He has no email.
I don't have it.
He's a black hole on the internet. His pointer points to nothing.
So next week we've got a fabulous. I think everyone is going to get a big kick out of it. Holiday special. One of the first of many time capsules. Let us know what you think, because I think people are gonna enjoy them a lot. That's what'll be airing on the 25th on Christmas. Will be a blast from the past.
Yay! I can't wait. That's gonna be fun. You can tweet at him. He's at SGGRC on the Twitter, and he may even tweet back at you.
Everyone knows I read them and I answer them.
Yeah.
So.
You're going to be sorry. He also puts 16 kilobit audio versions of this show, along with those great transcriptions written by Elaine Ferris, on his website, grc.com. Stop by there to get those. And, of course, SpinRite, the world's best hard drive maintenance and recovery utility. If you have hard drives, you ought to have SpinRite. You can also get a lot of free stuff there, like perfect paper passwords and more. grc.com. We do this show. Well, this is we'll be doing it one more time at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern time.
Yes.
1900 UTC on Wednesdays. We're moving to Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern time. It's 2100.
Yep, starting January 7th, I think it is.
January 7th is the first.
Oh, and that's the premiere date for
Intelligence.
Intelligence on
Intelligence
CBS,
will appear here and on CBS in an amazing coincidental dual sighting.
Collision of the galaxies.
Collision. Yeah. What else? If you can't watch live, though, we make on-demand audio and video available. He has it in lower quality audio, 16 kilobit audio for the bandwidth impaired. We have high quality audio, even video to watch our smiling faces at twit.tv/SN for security now. You can also subscribe at your favorite podcatcher, and that way you'll get every week. And you probably want to watch the whole set. Collect all.
And I
thousands.
will just tell everyone once again, because I'm getting a surprising number of questions about this. The show notes are at grc.com/SN, and it's the third icon over. So click on the third icon. You get the PDF that Leo has been reading and following along with me, and that I've been reading of the top of the show stuff with all the links in it that I refer to. So That's where they are.
Thank you for doing that. And thank you, everybody,
my friend,
for watching. Yeah.
And everybody will see me in studio with Leo all day Christmas Eve day on December 31st.
New Year's Eve day, yes.
What am I saying? Yes, New Year's Eve day.
Yes.
Yep.
You scared me for a moment.
Puttering around.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Looking forward to it. Thank you, Steve. It's always great to see you. Have a great Christmas, and we'll see you in the new year.
Thanks, Leo.
On security now.
Security.